to be her son and that I got to know her for the 15 years that I did. She set us up really well. She gave us the right tools and has prepared us well for life in the best way she could, not obviously knowing what was going to happen.
6 unmarked cars roll onto a quiet road in Norfolk before the sun is fully up. Officers move fast. A door opens. A man in his 60s steps out of Wood Farm, the house his own brother pays for, and he is placed under arrest. The date is February 19, 2026. The charge under investigation: suspicion of misconduct in public office. His name is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, once known as Prince Andrew, now a private citizen stripped of every title he was born with. Within hours, the palace answers. King Charles III releases a statement under his own name, signed simply Charles R. He says he has learned the news with deep concern. He says the law must take its course. He does not defend his brother. He does not attack him either. He chooses a handful of careful words and lets the silence around them do the rest of the work. That same day, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer is asked directly about the arrest. His answer is short. Nobody, he says, is above the law. That silence from the palace is the real story, because on the other side of the same family, a different Windsor has spent the back half of 2025 refusing to stay quiet. Charles Spencer, 9th Earl Spencer, brother of Diana, Princess of Wales, has been telling reporters on the record that a BBC interview built on forged bank documents helped trap his sister in isolation before her death in 1997. He calls it deception at the highest levels. He is not guessing. The BBC's own 2021 inquiry already confirmed the forged documents were real. Hi viewers, quick question before we go further. When a family stays silent to protect its image, do you think that silence protects the people inside it, or only the institution around them? Type your answer below. 2 Windsor men, 2 different responses to pressure. One chose a handful of guarded words about his brother. One has spent almost 30 years refusing to let his sister's story be softened. Royal commentators have started asking which pattern the next king will actually inherit. Not Charles, not Andrew, William, Prince of Wales. Everyone is watching Camilla. Royal biographers have long debated whether that is even the right thing to be watching, because while the cameras stay fixed on the Queen, the throne is quietly being built around someone else, and the report about to land inside Buckingham Palace is about to show, in hard numbers, exactly what that throne now costs the public to keep standing. 90%. That is the share of the British public who told pollsters at YouGov, just weeks before the arrest, that they already held a negative view of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. In the same survey, 60% held a positive view of King Charles. Between 61 and 67% still say Britain should keep its monarchy at all. 3 numbers, 1 family, 3 completely different verdicts. That gap is where this story actually lives. Most people watching the last few months assume they already know the plot. Diana versus Camilla, replayed in a new decade. Same jealousy, same betrayal, just older faces and higher stakes. It is the easiest read. It is also, according to several royal biographers, the wrong one. Here is the part most coverage skips. Camilla Parker Bowles did not become queen overnight, and she did not become queen quietly. She married Charles in 2005 as Duchess of Cornwall, a title chosen specifically to avoid the word princess, out of respect for how raw Diana's memory still was. It took until February 2022, in a message issued by Queen Elizabeth II herself during her Platinum Jubilee year, for the late Queen to state her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen when the time came. 17 years between wedding and title. That is not a woman who was handed a crown. That is an institution managing a wound in slow motion, one carefully timed announcement at a time. So when royal commentators call this a chess match, they are not talking about love. They are talking about sequencing. Camilla becomes less a person in this analysis and more a case study in how the palace absorbs a controversial figure over decades until the public simply gets used to her. Diana becomes the variable the palace can manage in public, but never fully in private, because grief does not follow a release schedule the way titles do. And Charles becomes the king, trying to hold both timelines together, in public, on camera, without either one collapsing on the other, while the world watches. Which leaves one person still unaccounted for, the one whose entire future reign is being built on top of whatever timeline the public ends up believing. William does not get to choose his mother's chapter or his stepmother's chapter. He inherits both on the same day, whether he is ready or not. The real chess match was never about who Charles loved. It is about who inherits the loyalty that took 17 years and one very careful royal announcement to build.
Westminster Abbey, September 6th.
She's an inspirational woman to look up to, obviously to this day, and going forward and things. It is, it's a wonderful family. The members who I've met have achieved a lot, and very inspirational.
1997. Inside, the family sits in the front rows, cameras trained on their faces. Outside, an estimated 2.5 billion people are watching on television, more than any broadcast in human history to that point. A younger brother walks to the lectern to deliver a eulogy for his sister. He is not a professional speaker, he is Charles Spencer, and within minutes, according to widely reported accounts from that day, he has delivered a eulogy that reads as a rebuke, not just of the press outside the Abbey, but of the family sitting a few feet from him. He does not shout, he does not need to. The words alone are enough to become one of the most replayed moments in royal history. That was 1997. Almost 3 decades later, in the closing months of 2025, Spencer is doing something strikingly similar, just through a podcast microphone instead of a lectern. Journalist Andy Webb publishes a book detailing how BBC executives concealed journalist Martin Bashir's use of forged bank statements to secure his explosive 1995 interview with Diana, documents that falsely suggested her own staff were spying on her for the royal family. The BBC's own Dyson inquiry confirmed the forgery back in 2021. Spencer goes further. He tells reporters he believes the deception directly contributed to his sister being left vulnerable in Paris on the night she died. Notice what has not changed in 28 years, from the stone floor of the Abbey to a modern recording studio. The setting is different. The audience is smaller, but the argument is identical. Institutions, Spencer says, protected their own image instead of protecting Diana, and the cost of that choice fell on her, not on them. Royal historians describe Diana's public gravity as something that does not fade the way ordinary celebrity fades. Polling on her continues to outperform almost every other royal figure, living or dead, nearly 30 years after her death. The palace can renovate a building, it can rewrite a title, it cannot fully retire a memory this large from public life, because the public was never asked to let go of it in the first place. For William, Prince of Wales, that means something specific and uncomfortable. He is not simply his mother's son, he is the walking, breathing intersection of her unfinished story and his father's ongoing one, and every time his uncle reopens the BBC file, the intersection gets a little harder to manage quietly. The problem was never Diana's silence. It was always going to be what her son chose to do with everyone else's. £132.1 million. That is the exact figure inside the royal household's 2025-26 Sovereign Grant Report, the annual document that tells British taxpayers precisely what the monarchy cost them over the past year. It is the first increase since 2021-22. Of that total, £67.5 million goes specifically toward preserving and protecting the occupied royal palaces, the buildings the public associates with permanence, dignity, and history. The number climbs further before it falls. For 2026-27, the grant rises again to £137.9 million, funding the final year of the decade-long Buckingham Palace resurfacing programme, a £369 million infrastructure overhaul, replacing wiring and plumbing untouched since shortly after the Second World War. After that, the number is set to drop sharply, down to £99.9 million a year from 2027 onward. The palace, in other words, is entering the most scrutinised stretch of its finances in over a decade, right as it tries to prove the spending was worth it. There is a second figure, published for the first time in this same report. Buckingham Palace has confirmed exactly how much personal tax King Charles has paid since becoming monarch, £11.7 million in 2023 to 24, £12.9 million in 2024 to 25, more than £30 million total since his accession. That transparency is deliberate. It is the palace trying to answer a question the public has been asking for years, in the clearest language available: numbers, not reassurances. For an audience outside Britain, here is why this matters more than it sounds. When public money touches royal image,
an address book, and I went through it, and I got to the end, and I thought, well, none of them are right. And then I had this sort of awful feeling that it's going to have to be me.
reputation stops being gossip and becomes a line item. A scandal involving Andrew is not just embarrassing. When a report like this is circulating, it becomes a direct argument for why taxpayers should question every pound spent on the institution around him. Every family wound, once money is attached to it, turns into a policy question, not just a tabloid one. This is not unique to Britain. Royal commentators who study monarchies globally point to a pattern. Wherever a family combines public funding with private wealth and inherited privilege, secrecy becomes the story just as often as scandal does, whether the crown sits in London, Madrid, or Riyadh. That comparison is speculation about a broader trend, not an accusation against any specific account or document tied to this family. No hidden ledger has been uncovered here. What has been uncovered is a British institution asking the public, in public, to trust numbers it has never fully published before. Money does not create royal scandal. It just removes the option of managing one quietly, and quiet is the one thing this family has always needed most. A podcast microphone is a strange place to threaten an institution, but that is exactly what happens in late 2025. Charles Spencer sits down with broadcaster Giles Brandreth and says, on record, that he once had a completely different eulogy prepared for his sister. He says he cut a line naming Rupert Murdoch, deciding the press baron did not deserve the publicity. It is a small detail. It tells a bigger story. Almost 30 years later, Spencer is still editing, in real time, exactly how the world is allowed to remember Diana. He does not stop there. In interviews tied to Andy Webb's book on the BBC's Bashir deception, Spencer states plainly that he believes the cover-up left his sister exposed on the night she died. He is naming an institution, not a person in his own family, and he is doing it in full public view, with a documented 2021 inquiry behind him. This is not a theory. This is a public figure making a public accusation, backed by an official finding. Here is where royal commentators start drawing a line some viewers will find uncomfortable. Several have floated a theory, and it remains a theory, not a confirmed fact, that every time Spencer forces the Diana story back into headlines, it becomes harder for the palace to let her memory soften into safe nostalgia, the kind of nostalgia that makes Camilla's 20-year journey to Queen feel fully settled. Nothing here proves the palace has a coordinated plan. No document has surfaced describing one. What is documented is the pattern. Spencer speaks, the story reopens, and the timeline the palace has spent 2 decades building gets measured against it all over again. William watches this play out from a different position than his uncle. He cannot fully defend the BBC. He cannot fully join his uncle's public case either, not without appearing to take a side against the institution he is set to inherit. Royal watchers describe this as the exact kind of no-win positioning that defines his current place in the family. Too senior to stay silent forever. Too close to the throne to speak freely. None of this happened in a single room, in a single moment, with raised voices caught on camera. That is not how this family fights. It happens in staggered interviews, timed statements, and inquiry reports released months apart, each one landing like a delayed shockwave the public has to piece together after the fact. But piece it together, and one pattern holds. Every time an old wound resurfaces, it is Charles Spencer applying the pressure, and it is William who inherits the decision about what to do with it. The Earl has made his move in public on record for anyone to check. The board has shifted under everyone's feet. William has not spoken yet. A camera light blinks on inside Clarence House in late November 2025. King Charles III sits for a video message, the kind no monarch wants to record twice. He tells the nation his cancer treatment can finally be reduced in the new year. He calls it a blessing. He calls it a milestone. The message airs on December 12th during a national cancer fundraising broadcast, and for a few hours the headlines are kind to him. Then a veteran royal reporter pushes back. Robert Jobson, author of The Windsor Legacy, says plainly that the good news was oversold. He states that the king is living with cancer and will keep living with it.
And Judo Rock, would you be disappointed?
I would be disappointed, but I mean, I think I can safely say that my guys would be disappointed. All that training that you've done as a group, you know each other, how each other works, you know when someone's grumpy without having to ask them, etc., etc.
With no realistic version of the story where it simply goes away. Buckingham Palace, for its part, describes the update as a move into a precautionary phase, still monitored, still reviewed. Two very different versions of the same sentence, both spoken on the record, both aimed at the same anxious public. This is what protecting the crown actually looks like in 2026. Not a throne room, not a raised voice, not a dramatic scene behind closed doors. A video message, a press statement, and a royal author publicly disagreeing with the palace's chosen tone within days of the broadcast airing. Underneath all of it sits a legal fact nobody in the family gets to negotiate. Succession in Britain runs on statute, not sentiment, built on centuries of law, including the Act of Settlement of 1701, and updated by the Succession to the Crown Act of 2013. Whatever happens to King Charles, William, Prince of Wales becomes king next. That part was decided by Parliament, not by grief, not by scandal, not by how any single family dinner goes. What was never decided by statute is harder. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams put it simply: the pressures on a king fighting cancer while his own brother sits under criminal investigation are intense. Charles is managing a health crisis, a scandal involving Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and the emotional inheritance of Diana's memory, all in the same 18-month window, all while cameras keep rolling. He chooses the same instinct every time: control the message, stay visible, let silence cover whatever cannot be explained yet. That instinct kept the monarchy standing through worse decades than this one, but it assumes the next generation will manage pressure the exact same way, and nothing in William's public record actually confirms that assumption. Charles believes the crown survives on steady nerves and careful statements, the same formula that carried his mother's reign through 7 decades of change. Somewhere inside his own household, a very different lesson is already being learned, and it did not come from him. Workers arrive at a farmhouse on the Sandringham estate in early 2026 to renovate a set of stables. The house is called Marsh Farm. The man moving in is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and his brother, the King, is paying for the move. He has already been evicted from Royal Lodge, the 30-room mansion he occupied for over 20 years. Police searched that same property days after his arrest. This is not the first time the family has quietly relocated a problem. It is simply the most recent. Rewind 14 months. In November 2025, before any arrest, King Charles III formally strips his brother of the title of Prince and the legal right to use his Royal Highness, reducing him to the status of a private citizen. Queen Elizabeth II had already removed his military titles back in 2022. Even now, constitutional experts point out something the public rarely hears explained. Andrew still legally holds his hereditary peerage, Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, and Baron Killyleagh, and removing those specific titles would require an actual Act of Parliament, not a palace statement. Losing Prince was optics. Losing a dukedom is law, and law moves slower than headlines. Here is the pattern worth noticing. In 2022, Andrew settled a civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre, reportedly paying around $16 million without any admission of wrongdoing. Giuffre died by suicide in 2024. Her siblings released a statement this year, after his arrest, saying their hearts had finally been lifted by the knowledge that royalty is not above the law. Years passed between the settlement and the arrest. Years in which titles stayed intact and questions stayed unanswered in public, even while they clearly were not unanswered in private. That gap between private knowledge and public reckoning is the actual warning here, more than Andrew himself. It shows how long this institution can sit with an unresolved problem before the public forces its hand. If you're wondering how far the fallout reaches, consider this. A plateau in Antarctica, 74 kilometres of ice named after Andrew when he was 2 years old, is now the subject of a public campaign to strip his name from the map entirely. When a scandal starts reshaping geography on the other side of the planet.
What makes you want to talk about this? You've not talked about this at all, until now. Why do you want to now talk about this?
I just felt that it was appearing every day in newspapers and various things, and I was listening to people, and that was an emotional day on the day that she died.
The moment you got the phone call.
It has stopped being a family embarrassment. It has become a referendum on the whole institution's judgment. William has watched every stage of this unfold from a few steps away, close enough to feel the temperature of each headline as it lands. Titles removed late, warnings ignored early. A private matter that became a public liability the moment silence stopped being an option. He has seen exactly how this pattern ends when nobody stops it in time. St George's Hall at Windsor Castle, March 18th, 2026. Trumpets, tiaras, a state banquet for the visiting President of Nigeria. King Charles and Queen Camilla host it. Prince William and Princess Catherine stand beside them. According to one account given to New Idea magazine by an unnamed insider, the king looked drawn that night, at one point appearing to lean back into his chair as though the evening had cost him something physical. That claim comes from a single anonymous source and has never been confirmed by the palace. So treat it as exactly that. One insider's account, not a verified fact. What is verified is smaller and arguably more important. Royal warrants, the formal seals companies display to show royal endorsement, have historically only ever been granted by the reigning monarch. Royal commentator Andrew Loney has suggested the monarchy may already be sitting inside a transitional phase, pointing to William taking a more active role in major decisions, and predicting he may handle reputational threats to the institution more directly than his father does. That is Loney's read of the pattern. It is not a palace announcement, and no constitutional motion has been filed. Separately, royal expert Hilary Fordwich has described William as determined to modernise the monarchy through decisions the public rarely sees up close, shaping how the institution presents itself for a generation that expects less formality and more transparency. Fordwich also suggests King Charles has shown some frustration with William's focus on his own household over broader statesmanship. Two experts, two different lenses, both publicly on record, both describing tension without describing a single confrontation. William has addressed some of this himself, in his own words, during a televised interview in which he says outright that he does not want to repeat the same mistakes his parents made, and that he is trying to do things differently for his own children. One royal author has separately described William as still carrying what she calls an unhealed wound from the 1995 interview that damaged his mother's life, tying his present caution directly back to that decades-old event. Quick thing before we move on. If you think William is quietly building a different kind of monarchy already, drop a comment and tell us what you think that looks like in practice. Catherine, Princess of Wales, is part of this shift too, described by commentators as increasingly influential as the couple's children grow older. Any talk online about a rivalry between her and Camilla remains just that, talk, unconfirmed by anyone inside the family. Nobody announced a changing of the guard. Nobody needed to. The guard had already started changing, one quiet decision at a time, long before any crown touches William's head, and long before the public was ever given a formal reason to notice. Picture two timelines running side by side for 30 years. In one, a woman spends decades slowly rebuilding a public reputation that started, by most historical accounts, about as low as any royal figure's has ever been. In the other, a man spends those same 30 years refusing to let his sister's story get smoothed over for anyone's comfort. Neither timeline is fake, both are exhausting to live inside. Camilla, Queen, married into this family in 2005, carrying more public resentment than almost anyone who has ever worn a British crown. Pollsters tracked her numbers for years afterward, and by most accounts they moved from deeply negative in the years right after Diana's death to genuinely positive by the time Queen Elizabeth II gave her blessing to the title Queen in 2022. That climb took 2 decades of public events, careful statements, and visible patience. Whatever anyone thinks of her personally, that is not the record of someone who was simply handed forgiveness. So here is the honest question this story keeps circling. Is Charles Spencer's continued public pressure about the BBC and about Diana's memory an act of justice? Or is it a refusal to let anyone in this family, including Camilla, ever fully move forward? Royal commentators are split. Some argue institutions only correct themselves when someone keeps the pressure on, pointing to the 2021 Dyson inquiry as proof that Spencer's persistence eventually produced an official, documented finding. Others argue that reopening a decades-old wound on a public platform again and again makes healing structurally impossible for everyone still living inside that story, Spencer included. Both arguments are being made by real people, in public, right now. Neither one is a lie. What almost nobody argues is that Camilla is secretly running some kind of scheme against Diana's memory, that framing sells headlines, but it does not survive contact with the record. The more accurate villain, if this story needs one, is a much less glamorous target. An institution that has, across decades, generally preferred slow-moving image management over fast, uncomfortable honesty. From Diana's isolation in the 1990s to Andrew's 14-month runway between losing his title and losing his freedom. William's own words offer the clearest window into where he actually stands, clearer than any tabloid theory could provide. He has said, on camera, in his own voice, that he is trying not to repeat his parents' mistakes, and that creating real warmth and safety at home matters more to him than performing a role for cameras. That is not a man plotting revenge against his father's wife. That is a man deciding, quietly and in his own timeline, what kind of promise he is actually willing to keep. Whether that promise survives contact with the actual weight of the crown, once it finally lands on him, is the only real question left standing. Strip away every headline from the last few months, and one plain legal fact remains standing exactly where it always was. William, Prince of Wales, becomes king after his father, because Parliament settled that question centuries before any of this began. No arrest changes it, no podcast interview changes it, no sovereign grant report changes it. The crown was never actually up for negotiation. What was never settled by any statute is the only thing that ever really mattered here. Not who sits on the throne next, but what kind of king sits on it. Everyone spent this story watching Camilla, the woman who spent 2 decades turning public resentment into something closer to acceptance. Everyone spent it watching Andrew, a cautionary tale measured out in stripped titles and empty houses. Everyone watched Charles, a king managing cancer treatment, and a family scandal in the same breath, choosing careful words because careful words are the only tool he has ever fully trusted. Charles Spencer kept one old file open the entire time, refusing to let his sister's story fade into something easier to live with. But the board was always tilted toward William. Every figure in this story, whether they meant to or not, has been handing him a lesson about what happens when an institution manages truth instead of telling it. Camilla's rehabilitation took 20 years of patience. Andrew's downfall took 14 months once the public finally forced it. Diana's memory never faded at all, no matter how many decades the palace tried to let it settle quietly. William has already said, in his own words, that he wants something different for his own children than what he had. That is not a rumour. That is not speculation. That is a public statement, on the record, from the man who will eventually hold every one of these lessons in one pair of hands. Whether he keeps that promise once the full weight of the crown actually lands on him is a story nobody, not the palace, not the commentators, not even William himself, can finish writing yet. That is exactly why this channel keeps digging into it. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture behind the headlines, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story the moment it goes live. Drop a comment below and tell us which royal you think is under the most pressure right now. Share this with someone who needs the real context instead of just the noise, and let's keep this conversation going together.